Well, folks, we've got some more custom cards, and this time around I asked all of you to make Duels Treasures, both passive and active treasures, both tier 1 and tier 2. You'll note the tier there mentioned below each card. Like this one, a tier 1 passive from Auditorial, it's called Second Chance. It reads, after your third loss this run, prevent it and choose an active treasure. So, man, you think you're going to get ripped off by some absolutely crazy high roll and you're going to end your run on some nonsense. Well, you can take Second Chance and get another go at it so that those crazy high rollers don't ruin an otherwise great duels run. But of course, it comes with some sacrifice. It comes with a cost. You aren't getting a normal tier 1 passive, which can clearly offer some big benefits. You know, Be Our Guest gets you great, crazy game-winning legendary invitations. Are you willing to give those up for something like Second Chance? You might if you think your deck is good enough, or if you're expecting to get a tier 2 passive that's really going to carry your run. You might say, look, I don't really need a tier 1. It's not going to do that much for me. Or maybe the other two things that got offered just weren't that good. So Second Chance feels like a freebie, a nice way to potentially extend my run. And then when it does go off, I get this active treasure to choose from as well, presumably on top of whatever the normal treasure and or bucket you are going to be offered after that game. Anyway, getting a bonus treasure is a nice way to shore up that weakness. So are you willing to sacrifice your passive for another chance? I think some people certainly would be, and I think that's a cool decision point as well. This would be a welcome treasure. I think would feel good in a lot of instances. So next up here, we have Beginner's Aid from Magic Milk, a new tier 2 passive. It reads, cards that were in your starting deck cost 2 less, but not less than 1. And this could be a really big boon to your early to mid game run when you still have a high density of your starting cards in your deck. Of course, it becomes less and less likely to draw a starting card as you move into your run and you extend the size of your deck. So this one would fall off a little bit over time. Perhaps that's why it's called the Beginner's Aid, but you could still do some things to manipulate that, play an order in the court, run a bunch of high cost cards in your starting deck, and discount all your biggest, best stuff potentially. That could be a cool way to use this one, or just punctuate your deck with really powerful swingy style plays, or build around cards that when you do hit them are going to make a really big impact. If they are 2 mana cheaper, you could use other ways to thin and tutor your deck to probably manipulate Beginner's Aid to your advantage. So I think it's really cool here to build around the beginning of your deck and try to kind of control around that. Could be a fun way to both create a deck that is able to utilize this well, but then maintain it over time as well, and really dig for those no more please buckets to maintain as much starting deck consistency as possible. Moving on here to Reign of Chaos, a tier 2 ultra rare was specified here, coming in as an ultra rare. This one's from Little Sunflora, a 10 mana active treasure. It reads, replace each player's hand and deck with random cards. Yours cost 3 less. So if you're willing to spend this 10 mana up front, you can start to net a ridiculous mana advantage over your opponent, while also disrupting their deck and just, you know, playing toward the gods of chaos, hoping that you can get some cool plays out of yours. But I like this idea. I like these big, crazy, completely chaotic things. These aren't reliable or, you know, consistently powerful. I think we've had a little bit too much of that in duels lately. I want to just go absolutely wacky in duels sometimes, and a card like this does that. And it also helps you counter some of the absurdly consistent builds you see in duels. Oh, they got a bunch of relics, so I know they're gonna have 17 Relic of Phantasms in their deck. I'm just going to play Reign of Chaos. Good luck. Get rid of those relics. We're going toe-to-toe here with random cards instead. I would welcome that. I would absolutely pick this for the crazy highlights. Crazy fun. Is it disruptive? Yes. Is that frustrating for some players? Perhaps, but it's such a big sacrifice at 10 mana. Not every deck's going to be able to cheat that out early, for instance. I think it's balanced, especially since you got the ultra rare aspect there as well. It would be a very occasional, very insane, very, very fun highlight sort of card. I personally welcome the Reign of Chaos Overlords to duels. I would love more stuff like this. Before we move on, I'd like to talk about our sponsor for this video. It's Keeps. Yeah, if you didn't know, 2 out of 3 guys will experience some form of male pattern baldness by the time they're 35 years old, and the best time to do something about it is while you still have hair left. And with Keeps, it's super easy. You can talk to a doctor online. You don't have to head into the office, and they'll send the prescription right to your door, saving you lots of time, so you can queue up another duels run. So if you're losing your hair, it's time to do something about it. For a limited time, you can go to keeps.com/Regis or visit that link down there in the description for 50% off your first order. All right, next up here, a tier 2 passive from Wooern. This is Spectral Projection. It reads, at the start of your turn, summon a 1/1 copy of a minion from each player's deck. And I love this. A nice little symmetrical effect here to keep this a little bit in balance, but has some obvious potentially huge upsides if you have big scary effects, big death rattles, awesome stuff in your deck. You know, if you're summoning 1/1 Ragnaroses and Tyrion Fordrings and Neptulons, you know, you're gonna be rather happy when your opponent is just getting little meager 1-drops on their side of the board. Clearly you could net a real advantage here, but it could also backfire because as you get deeper to run, you often have to add weaker minions, random stuff from buckets into your deck, so you're not always gonna high roll into absolute absurdity, and your opponent might also have some good stuff in their deck too. So it's definitely going to be an inconsistent way to try to power spike. It might actually be a little bit too powerful with the Neptulons of the world. This could be really dominant in the mid-run portion of a run, games like 3 through 7 or something, when your deck is still pretty small and tightly packed and you're getting some absurd high rolls. But I think, you know, making this a 1/1 copy, of course, is really heads up way to mitigate some of that risk. Even a 1/1 Ragnaros isn't that insane in duels. A 1/1 Neptulon's still pretty nuts, but maybe not that scary. You know, that's still only 4 total health summoned into play even with Neptulon. So I think this one does a good job of hedging a little bit against that power by both making it symmetrical and nerfing the stats of the summoned minions. So I suspect this might actually be okay, and definitely feels like a realistic sort of treasure. Great name and art to boot with this one as well. All right, next up is the Fair Bargain, a tier 1 from Sanchez Ing, and this is a pretty crazy one. It's a passive, of course. After your first trade in a turn, shuffle a bomb into your opponent's deck. So we've already got, you know, bomb warrior shenanigans with Rattlegore in duels. This could be another way for everybody else to get access to bomb decks if you're trading, and it's only once per turn, so it doesn't get crazy snowbally. Perhaps you could run a Rattlegore trade deck that had both armor and trade cards and shuffled 2 bombs per turn into the opponent's deck. That might be a little scary. Perhaps you could turn this off for Rattlegore, but I like the idea of supporting a really specific keyword in a fun way. I'm trading literal candle bombs into the opponent's deck. So opening up this line of play to other decks might help even the odds a little bit against some of those nutty Rattlegore scenarios. But also enabling, you know, randomly, rarely seen keywords. We have all these trade buckets in duels, and having a way to empower those and build around them is pretty nice. I'd like to see more specific keyword support like this one. All right, next up is Cirques 101 and Genetic Advantage, a tier 1 passive that reads, after you summon a beast, randomly adapt it. Again, pulling back an old keyword this time, pulling back an Unguro keyword with adapt. I think this is perfectly fitting for duels. You want to play a beast deck, you want to get little bonuses to your beasts here and there. Sometimes it won't do much, just giving a beast taunt, but sometimes that key Wind Fury or key stealth roll could be a really big difference and could offer some nice power for a tier 1 passive, but you have to support it specifically with beasts. I might make this after you play a beast instead of summon, because there's some pretty crazy wideboard summons. Cards like Unleash the Hounds could go absolutely bonkers, getting Wind Furies and +3 attacks and so on. So perhaps play would be a little bit safer for this, but I still love the idea of pulling Adapt back into duels in a big way. There are so many untapped old keywords and mechanics that duels has never really gone to yet, despite having these expansions in the pool and available for duels. So this is a perfect example of a really open design space being captured really simply in a nice tier 1 passive. Next up here from Artie, we have a tier 1 active treasure. It's a 0 mana Chromie's Aid, and it reads, start of game, draw this, and then start your turn over. So this is harkening back to Tomy Time Tinker in the Witchwood Monster Hunt, it's called, where you could restart your turn if you have bad RNG rolls, you discover something and it's garbage choices, or you fire off some arcane missiles and they don't hit what you want. You hit the button and you get to start your turn over again and try again. But with Chromie's Aid, you only get to do this once. So you could have a big crazy turn with Rune of the Archmage digging for lethal and you didn't hit it, so you rip the Chromie's Aid and you try again, or maybe you go for a totally different line because you realize you had a better play along the way. I would love to be able to revert some bad trades and bad decisions I know in duels, so I would probably take Chromie's Aid. But I think this, another get out of jail free style card. Oh, I messed something up, or that didn't go my way, I'm going to take another chance. These kinds of cards can feel really good. Not to mention, anytime you have a start of a game, draw this card. It's basically free for you in duels because you're just getting that extra resource in hand. It's not, cluttering up your deck with junk you don't want. It's keeping your deck smaller and still giving you this nice reroll. So I think this would be a really cool treasure to see. I don't think it's too powerful necessarily either. Just getting to, change the course of fate a little bit. Doesn't really give you extra resources or extra damage or extra output. It just modifies your luck, and often that's not too crazy. Moving on here to Endless Elements from Sam Pham Designer, a tier 2 passive, and this one plays towards elementals. After you play an elemental, discover one to play next turn. And this is a really good fit for the elemental mechanic. The elemental mechanics is all about playing elementals last turn and then getting a nice upside. So this is another one that plays into a minion type that has very little actual support in duels. There's really no reason to play elementals or build around elementals. So this again feels like a freebie synergy fit, just opening up another minion type in a really compelling way compared to things like Cookie's Ladle that just give you all these endless murlocs from your deck. This one is both a little bit more refined in that you get to discover one, which is nice because you can line up good plays for yourself, but also I think fits a lot better into the mechanic of the minion type itself for elementals. So all in all, this just feels like a really good, easy fit. I don't know what they mean exactly by to play next turn, if that is an intended limitation on the card, like the elemental can only be played next turn, or if that's sort of a hint towards the elemental mechanic. Curious to hear what you guys think about the intention there, or perhaps Sam Pham will chime in. But either way, whether it's limited or not, it often still is going to give you a cool resource for the next turn and play nicely to those elemental lines. So yeah, I mean, I just wish more stuff like this existed in duels. I think this is a really good, easy solution to opening up so much more design space in duels. All right, next up we have the Chromatic Orb from Magic Milk, a tier 1 passive that reads, after you cast your first spell each turn, draw a spell from a different school. And a really cool way to cycle through different spells here. And what I love about this card is that it encourages a diversity of options. You don't have to narrowly play only frost spells or only fire spells, which is so much of what we see in duels right now, captured nicely with the Chromatic name, by the way. And what that does is a couple things. Like it lets you play different styles of things. You don't have to go all in on fire if you don't like fire, all in on frost, etc. You can play a mix. I like this arcane spell, I like this fire spell, I like this frost spell. But beyond that, it's good across multiple classes. Often feels like, fire and frost. Okay, that's like for shaman and mage, and nobody else really gets to enjoy the fire and frost synergies. And nature is for shaman and druid, and nobody else gets to enjoy the nature synergies, really. All of them have some sort of soft limitations where most classes feel like they don't have access to these fun ways to play. But with Chromatic Orb, basically everybody, except perhaps Rogue and Warrior, who use a lot of non-type spells, have cool ways to play with Chromatic Orb and really enable this treasure across the entire breadth of duels. And I wish we had more general use treasures like that a lot of people could utilize fairly well instead of focusing in on these super narrow builds like we often see right now in duels, because this just opens up different deck ideas, different ways to play, instead of piling into the same refined meta decks over and over again. So really elegant design here that's really fun. This could be a little powerful for tier 1. I think it's just a lot of great card draw, but perhaps not. We've had other highly efficient card draw engines be okay at tier 1 as well. So either way, really fun design here on the Chromatic Orb. I really wish we had more stuff like this in duels. And there you go, folks. That wraps it up for the custom card review of Duels Treasures. Some cool ideas here to explore. Honestly, some low-hanging fruit, I feel like, in Duels. A lot of these ideas weren't particularly extravagant or crazy, but just felt like good fits that play into things we could very easily do in Duels. I think would be a lot of fun to see in Duels. So great ideas all across the board. That said, if you want to submit a custom card for next time around, check that link down there in the description for the submission form and details for the next video. Thanks much as always for watching, and until next time, game on.